Hello, thank you for being here. I will just briefly talk about how I was introduced to you and then we'll dive straight in. So, on TikTok, I love watching people who've duetted my videos and I try my best to watch them all. And then one day, your gorgeous face popped up and I thought, who's this? And I clicked your page and I had a little dive into your videos and what you talk about, especially what caught my eye was the inner child healing and just the movement that you're trying to push here that I love, and who could not love it. So when I watched your video and I followed you, and then one day I joined your live and I was like, hi, and you said, oh my god, Ben, oh my god, Ben, and then you said, do you watch the video back so you didn't fangirl too much? And then we done a live together, and when we had a phone call to discuss the live on your page, we spoke about the law of attraction and manifesting and how you're starting your journey or getting into your journey there, and it's something I believe we all subconsciously manifest, but we'll get back into that. So inner child healing is something I've spoken about. We'll talk about that today. We'll talk about a lot of other things. Inner child healing is something I've spoken about, and as you can see, I've got Lego everywhere in this room, and I collect these Spider-Man figures, and because when I was a child, my mother was like, I'm not buying you Lego to have it sat on a shelf. So now I buy Lego and I have it sat on a shelf. And I love it. It makes me feel great coming in here, even though my daughter takes it all apart. So I haven't talked much on my page about techniques or too much about the benefits. So I will let you take the stage. Firstly, if you'd like to tell me, Jen, who you are and what it is you do here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the great intro. Um, so I actually remember the first video that I shared of yours about, I don't know, it's about 6 weeks ago or something like that. And it was a video of you talking about how to connect with your inner child. So you were saying about people doing things that they used to love as a child, but may not have been able to do. They might have got told off for it. Like you said, your thing is Lego. And your mum said, oh, you can't have that because it'll just be on a shelf not doing anything. So now you've embraced that. You've kind of taken the power back is how I see it from that. And now you're creating these nice brand new memories around Lego. And I think that a lot of it is about reclaiming our power. That's what I see inner child healing about. So when I saw the first video I shared of yours was that. And I was just like, yes, this guy is bang on, because I talk about inner child healing. I dream about inner child healing. It's literally, I think it's life-saving. And I know that might sound a little bit exaggerated or maybe extra, but I believe that it saved my life. That's how strongly and how passionately I am about this kind of work. And I think that a lot of it can feel quite abstract when we're thinking about, what does that even mean? How can I have a child living within me? And all of that sort of stuff can be quite hard to get your head around, and even like talking about self-worth. So, you know,
A lot of it doesn't even have to be, sorry to cut you off there. A lot of it doesn't even have to be like Lego or doing fun things or doing childish things. What I think helps a lot is doing now as an adult what you should have done as a child, what you deserve to do. And a lot of people couldn't relax as kids because there was threats and there was arguments and there was violence at home, or even just emotional abuse and manipulation. So they couldn't be authentic. So for people, when you were children and you had to just do all the chores in the house or be the third parent or be a therapist to your parents, you never had a chance to be a child and it stunted your growth. Now, as an adult, you can just lay on the sofa all day and watch Harry Potter because you would have loved to do that and not have responsibilities as a child. So I think it's all about living your childhood, but doing the things that you would have loved to do.
and it's all about like, it's just making that connection with yourself. I think so many of us are walking around with no idea about who we are
Yeah.
as people, because a lot of us have been told who we are supposed to be. We're told what to like, we're told what not to like, we're conditioned by society in a certain way. And so a lot of people do grow up. I mean, they get to like age 50s and 60s and they don't know who they are. I didn't have a clue who I was. And before I started any of this work, when I was 37, was I 37? 4 years ago. Yeah, it was that age, wasn't it? Sorry, I'm just forgetting the age now. But yeah, it's I was 37 and I had no idea who I was because I was always trying to be what everybody else wanted me to be.
Yeah, and that's the conditioning, I think. A lot of our parents treat us as though we are extensions of them. And if we're not benefiting them or doing something to please them, then we made it feel guilty or feel like a bad child. So we're always working towards that. So we're always, our parents are trying to mold us into this perfect version of a child for them, the easiest version of a child. And when we're kids, we can't question if our parents are right or wrong. They have to be right. So we're like, okay, I will be this person you want me to be. And then we move out, we drift apart because we understand that they weren't actually good parents. And then as adults, we think, oh shit, who am I supposed to be? And they have no hobbies, and you're alone with your own thoughts, and it's terrifying, and you don't know where you want to go. So you just wait in autopilot, waiting for something to happen, and it doesn't. And a lot of people turn to bad things, or they turn to bad relationships, because that's all they were conditioned to believe was normal. And then again, we've got these 40, 50, 60, 70-year-olds who have no idea who they are and are constantly trying to fit in and be molded into a version of them for every single person they meet.
Absolutely. And that breaks my heart, to be honest. It breaks my heart that people are navigating. We get this one experience, we get this one chance at life, and so many people out there don't know who they are, and not being their most authentic selves, are not living life to their full potential because they're getting in their own way because of what they've been led to believe. You know, I had a client even earlier today, and I said to him, what did you used to do as a child? And he was like, oh, I used to do a bit of art, but I'm not very good at it. I went, who said you're not very good at it? Oh, well, everyone told me I wasn't very good at it. I was like, exactly. And it's not about being good at things.
Yeah.
It's not about, you know, it's not this whole mindset that we have to be really great at things. We have to be able to sell it. We have to market in something. No, we don't. We have to do things that bring us joy. And that's what life's about. That the essence of life is joy. And if we don't have joy in our lives, then we can't live a happy, fulfilling life. We just can't. But you can't do those things unless you've made a connection with yourself and found out who you are in the first place. Because you can, you know, my joy was going down the pub and getting smashed. That was my joy. That was my only hobby, really, before I did any in-child work. So
before we touch on the inner child work, then before we get into the techniques that you'd like to use, if you don't mind, I know you said you suffered with addiction, alcohol and drugs, and you and I both know that when we suffer things like that, it's not the problem. It's more of a product of the problem, and it's a way to escape the reality. And often when we don't know who we are, and it's so scary being on our own because we don't know who we are, we find something to escape it. So are you able to dive briefly into your story there on where that started and how you got into that place?
Yeah, totally. So I wasn't really what you kind of see like would call an alcoholic. So, and because I thought I'm not an alcoholic because I'm not sitting on a park bench drinking out of a brown paper bag, and I have a job, you know, I'm functioning. How can I be an alcoholic? But when I look back at it now, you know, I think there's a term called alcoholic disorder or something, or alcohol disorder. I'm not quite sure on the terminology, but anyway, when I started looking at my relationship with alcohol, it was not healthy. So as much as I wouldn't still not necessarily say I was an alcoholic, I would definitely say that my relationship with booze was unhealthy. And when I think about when I first started drinking, I was 15. I was 15 when I first went out and I first drank, and I drank this bottle of vodka. I mean, I didn't drink all of it, but I drank just straight vodka. And this is my first experience of drinking. And I actually split my eye open, and you can actually still see the scar there. Because I had my mum was an alcoholic. My mum was quite a severe alcoholic. And what I mean by that is that she couldn't hold down a job. She didn't have friends. And she like literally went out begging for money so she could buy drinks. So her alcoholism was quite extreme. And in her family as well, like her dad was an alcoholic, and alcoholism is in my family. It's in both my sides of my family. My dad's mum was an alcoholic, and she was a rageaholic as well. So she got really angry when she was drunk, and she used to really be quite cruel to her kids, of which was my dad and his sisters. So, and as much as my dad said he would never drink alcohol because of what happened to him from his parents, because both of his parents were alcoholics, but his dad was more of a friendly alcoholic. But his dad actually ended up dying. His dad died on a motorbike accident when my dad was 19 because he was drunk on his motorbike. So it's like there's so much alcohol related stuff in my family. So for me, I was always kind of conscious of the fact that I didn't want to be an alcoholic because I didn't want it to sort of ruin my life. And I really was quite ambitious and quite career driven, and I really wanted to get somewhere in my life. I grew up in quite a poor home, and obviously around addiction and around violence too. My dad was very angry, and he took it out on all of us. So And that kind of dysfunction when you're growing up around that, I just wanted out. I just couldn't wait to grow up. I couldn't wait to be an adult. I felt like I was an adult already when I was around 6 or 7 years old, because my parents were just so immature. And there's no blame here, you know, they did their best that they could have done. My parents had really difficult backgrounds, and I don't like to sort of talk negatively about them, to be honest. I'm not obviously doing that here. But I believe I have to tell my story and the truth of what it was for me and how I experienced life and why I ended up getting into alcohol, which is what your question was originally. So growing up, I saw how my mum coped with her problems was by getting smashed. And, you know, there's so many times when my mum couldn't come to any of my special occasions, like when I graduated from university, for example, and I got a first class degree, she couldn't come because she was drunk. Or when I had any birthday party, any birthday sort of celebration, I mean, we even had a 40th birthday for her and she couldn't come because she was too drunk. And I had to try and go back to the house and try and lift her off the floor to try and be like, Mum, it's a birthday party that we've organized for you. So the alcoholism side of my life growing up had really had a severe impact on me, especially as like a highly sensitive person, of which I believe I am. And so when I had my first interaction with alcohol when I was 15, I smashed my eye open, I was like, you know what, this is great. As much as that doesn't sound great, I was like, this is great. Drink feels good to me. And I was smoking, and that's when the drug taking started. And I was like, you know what, I'm getting quite a lot of validation from this. And obviously I didn't have the words to be able to articulate this back in the day. But when I look back at it now, I was like, oh, I just loved it, going out smoking, drinking, partying, becoming the fun one. I became the fun one. And this was the thing. This is why I wouldn't have called it being an alcoholic necessarily. I called it just having a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol. So anyway, I went out and I just used to drink all the time. So, and then I think when it got to a point where I thought, you know what, you've got a problem, you've got to stop. So I drank all of my life from the age of 15. And it was when I got to the age of 37. And I noticed that I was drinking more than I would usually. And what I mean by this, I was drinking throughout the week on school nights. I was drinking because before I had some kind of rules around it, you know, oh, I only drink Fridays and Saturdays, so it's fine. You know, that's the addiction talking anyway, when you're telling yourself stuff like that. But I was like, it's fine, it's contained, I'm not an abuser, I'm using it, I'm having fun, and everybody like loved me. Like all of my friends were like, yeah, come on, Jen, we're going to get drunk. And I'd be the one getting the shots in. And because it's so socially acceptable, I got a lot of validation from it, right? So in the lead up to so I had a breakdown when I was 37, of which has inspired all this work that I've started to do on myself and where the channels come from, really. But when I was 37, I noticed there was a period of time where I was drinking constantly. And I sort of said to myself, Jen, why are you doing this? And I just asked myself, and I was like, I think I'm trying to escape something, but I'm not sure what it is. So I was like, right, I'll keep drinking then, because I couldn't quite get to the, what I believe is now this kind of divine intervention that happened in my life. I couldn't quite get there because I never had any skills. I never, as in like to be able to know what was going on with my body. I was so disassociated. I spent most of my time watching myself like I was on TV, or most of my time outside of my body, witnessing what was going on rather than me being in my body. And I know that that's quite a common response as well from like traumatic experiences, that we leave our body, and it's called dissociation. So I noticed this period of time, and I had quite a lot of anniversaries as well. My mum died when I was 25 from alcoholism. She nearly died the first time when I was 15. I was doing my GCSEs at the time. And I believed her when she said that she wasn't going to drink again, because we literally said goodbye to her that night. She was going to die. And then she miraculously made this recovery overnight. She was only 33 herself, but that's how severe her drinking was, to have obviously drank that much that you would nearly die from it at 33. Anyway, she got to 45 and then she passed away from that. And then my brother took his own life a year later, and he was also an alcoholic. And so those things kind of were happening around me, and I kind of just went, you know what, it's fine, everything's okay. I'm just going to be positive about this. I'm just going to keep being happy. I'm just going to keep working really hard. So I just threw myself into my job, climbed the career ladder, and my life just looked really great from the outside. I had a house, I had really steady relationship, really healthy relationship. I had the success. I was at the top of my game in my career. And then all these anniversaries started popping up, and I started to ask myself, what's going on here? And it's my brother's anniversary. And then my mum's anniversary, and they're very close together. and I could feel this real pain. I remember sitting in my, I was home, kind of homeless around the time as well. And I was sitting in my friend's kitchen and I was just crying, and I was just about to go to a rave, another rave, because that's all I was really doing, was going out partying, taking drugs, whatever. And I was just about to go to this rave, and I was just sitting in her kitchen crying. I was going, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why I'm feeling all this pain. I just had this undescribable grief and pain, and it was just heavy, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I just wanted to be sick, and I can feel it now when I'm talking about it. It's going to make me a bit upset. Sorry.
Don't be silly. A couple of things. Thank you for sharing. It's tough when, I know from experience, my father was an alcoholic, and this, again, it's strange saying it because they don't feel like one. They're a functioning alcoholic, I guess.
Yeah.
He died when he was 44. And first thing you said, my parents had a bad upbringing, or they had a bad past, so I don't blame them. You're not talking bad about your parents. You're just speaking your truth, which you deserved. Yeah. You deserve to speak that.
Yeah.
Alcohol was all you knew growing up, so that became normal. And when you found yourself in alcohol, that became who you are, because that was normal for your family. But you said father was angry, violent. Your mother suffered really bad with alcohol, and you were here helping other people. So you're saying my parents, you make excuses for your parents because they made excuses for themselves. And again, if you feel like the worst child in the world when you talk badly about parents, but you're just speaking your truth. It's not talking badly about parents, especially when a parent's passed. I've been there. But when you say they done this because of the childhood and you grew up the same way and turned it around, they could have. So I think you should be proud of yourself for coming through there. Tell me about how you got out of this place.
So when I realized, I was sitting in a kitchen with my friend, and I realized, I knew something was going on. There was something saying to me, Jen, something's going on here. This isn't right. You're really acting out. You're behaving really badly. What's going on? And anyway, I went to the party, went to the rave, ended up staying up all weekend, went partying with all these people I didn't know, which was just the usual for me at the weekend. So anyway, and then it kept happening. I went, Jen, so a few weeks after that, I went, Jen, I think you should maybe cut alcohol out and see what happens. And I went, okay, I'm going to do this. So I cut alcohol out, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm just going to see what happens. And there was another part that happened as well. I was dating at the time. And I was doing it in a very obsessive way. And I'd noticed that I was doing it in an obsessive way. So I noticed that I was spending like 3 hours on dating apps a night, just sitting there scrolling for hours and hours, and hours would go past and I wouldn't even notice. So it was that I was a bit like, so you're doing this drinking, you're taking these drugs, you're dating. And I went on like 4 dates in a row with people I had no interest in, to be honest.
Just trying to find your happiness in someone.
Trying to find it. Desperately trying to find something to make me feel something other than this horrendous pain that I was going through. And it was that I sort of said, right, I think you need to stop the drinking, and I think you need to stop dating as well, because I don't think it's very good for you. So anyway, I just stopped it. I just said, stop, don't do it anymore. And it was literally 7 days later, I was sitting in a meeting at work. There was a big table. There was about 15 people around a table, and I'm sitting in there doing my usual job. And all of a sudden, my face started shaking. It started going up and down. And I was like, what on earth is going on with my face? And then my whole body started shaking. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm in a meeting. How am I going to, because obviously the shame, I wouldn't want anyone to know that there was any pain going on here, because I was so hypervigilant, I suppose. And so I just didn't want anyone to know, and so private about my life, and so scared and so shameful. And I had so much shame around my childhood, and everything about me I had shame around, that I wouldn't want anyone to know. So I just sat on my hands and just went, Jen, you're going to be all right. And I was just breathing through it. And then I managed to get out. Oh, my phone, sorry. Hold on. And I managed to, we left the meeting, and I went upstairs, and I said to one of my colleagues, I said, I need to get out of here, but I need you to come with me, because I don't think I can walk. She went, what? I was like, I don't think I can walk. Something's happening to me, and I don't know what it is. And she said, okay, I'm just going to wrap up. So I went and waited in reception for her. She came out, and she just held me, and then we walked out about 10, 15 steps to get to this park. And I just collapsed. She was like, Jen, what's going on? What's going on? I was like, I don't know what's going on. And I was panicking. I was having panic attacks. Something's going on. Something's wrong. And I just remember like thinking, what's happening to me? What's wrong with me? Like, I thought I was okay. I thought I was managing everything. I thought everything was good. You know, I'm doing really well in my life. What's happening? And all of a sudden this voice just came and said, you have to deal with your childhood. And I was like, what are you talking? I was just like, what is this voice? And what does that mean? And it was just like, you have to deal with your childhood. You have to deal with the fact that you grew up and your mum was an alcoholic. You have to deal with it. And I was like, what does this even mean? I don't know. I don't understand. And anyway, I didn't get it. I didn't understand what it meant. But anyway, I was like, I went back to my job and I was like, yeah, I'm going to have to go home. I'm not feeling very well. So I got home and I just started Googling it. Growing up with an alcoholic parent, what does it mean? Just started doing research. And then I found out that growing up with an alcoholic parent gave you a certain, means that you develop a certain traits, character traits, behaviors in order to cope. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. What are these then? And then I found out perfectionism was related to it. I found out that people pleasing was related to it. I found out that fear of authority was related to it. I found out that fear of criticism was related to it. And I just went, oh my God, that's me. That's everything. And I just, so it's basically this this list of character traits of which I ticked nearly every single one of them. And I went, that was it. It was like life-changing. So that was how it happened. The fact that I knew consciously that I was acting out in these behaviors. I was drinking, I was going on all these dates, and something toxic was going on with me, but I couldn't name it. And it literally stopped it 7 days later. And it was like, and I see that as some kind of like intervention, some kind of spiritual awakening, something, because it was literally a physical body reaction. And after that, I had to take 2 months off work because I was in so much grief and so much pain that I literally had to spend a good week lying on the floor stiff because I couldn't move because of the pain that I was having to process and go through. Because over all the years, I was just like, I'm fine. My mum died from alcoholism, it's fine. The funeral, I was fine. I was the happiest fucking person at my mum's funeral, which is crazy. But I believed, I read all the self-help books, all the positivity books, everything told me that I was just supposed to smile and be happy. So that's what I tried to do. I was obsessed with trying to be the most positive, happiest person in the world because I didn't want my past to impact me. But I was faking it the whole time, but I didn't know.
I think a lot of the time we get stuck in this toxic, unhealthy frame of mind, but we don't realize. And because it happens for so many years and we're conditioned to think it's normal, it becomes safe for us. So anything outside of that comfort zone where there is actual peace and happiness and authenticity, it's terrifying because we've never been there. So a lot of the time it's intervention, call it divine intervention, call it spirituality. A lot of the time we have to go through this trauma, unfortunately, to come out the other end, because you can't experience the highs if you haven't experienced the lows. Tell me how we went from this point in your life and researching who you actually were to inner child healing.
So when that happened to me, I thought I'd died. I believed that I was dead. I know it sounds weird, not to you necessarily, but I'm just thinking people might watch this. I believe I had to go through this grieving process, and the grieving process took a while, and I had no idea. And I was like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I don't like. I don't know what my values are.
That's it. Your old self died.
Yeah. And I was going through this pain and of loss of myself, loss of the person that I created. I was like, who am I? I got no fucking idea. It was terrifying. And I remember staying with my friends. So I was sort of staying with my friend at the time because I didn't have anywhere else to live. And I said to her, like, what's going to happen? Am I me? Do you recognize me anymore? Am I still look the same? What's going on? And she's like, you are you. You're still you. And I'm like, God, thank God you told me that, because at the moment I'm going through this, crisis, absolute crisis. And I reached out. So for me to get to the inner child stuff, so I got into 12-step programs. Because on doing my research, I found a 12-step program that actually supports children who had alcoholic parents. And this 12-step program actually supports people who had alcoholic parents and other dysfunctional behavior. So when I found that list was from this 12-step group that said, this is a list of traits that you probably have if you grew up around alcoholism. So I found that group, and that group is actually, it's called Adult Children of Alcoholics, and it actually calls children who grew up in an environment adult children. And it is an expression that does get used, and I know it can be a bit strange when you're first hearing about it, but within that, you learn about your inner child, and you learn about reparenting yourself. And that was it for me. As soon as I started learning about that, I went, this is it, because I had no connection to myself, and I wasn't parenting myself at all. I was like not eating, just drinking. I would just be drinking on my own, taking drugs on my own. And that's when I was just like, hell, this is really bad parenting. You know, for if I was a parent, a healthy parent, and I saw somebody behaving in this way, I'd want to help them and I'd want to support them. So that's what I have to do for myself. And it was from doing this research into these programs and actually going to these 12-step programs that I managed to get the tools, of which now I basically share on my channels, but just not in the same way, because a lot of stuff about 12 steps, there's a lot of stuff that I don't particularly gel with. You know, I'm not into necessarily the God side of things, because I grew up in a very strict Catholic home, and I believe that had a lot of issues with it around shame and judgment and all of that sort of stuff. So it's not really something that I really get on board with. However, the program that I did was about a higher power or a spiritual being. It sort of used other language as well. So that's something that I could warm to. And I've always called it a power greater than myself. And I sort of look at it as far as like the universe is concerned and nature and that. And it was learning about, so that program taught me a lot, but now I've just taken the tools out of that program and then started to see what's right for me. And that's what I think any approach to any kind of education or any kind of like program or any kind of training that you might do, it's not anything that I talk about. You know, it's not to take everything that I say on board. You know, some things you're not going to agree with, and that's okay. You know, it's about taking what you need and leaving the rest. And that's how I got my approach to kind of my 12-step programs, of which I've done 2 and completed 2 now.
I love what you said then about take what you need and leave the rest.
Yeah.
That's great. For someone who is just learning about inner child healing or just getting into it, what would be the go-to technique where you would start and you'd think that would have the most benefit for them?
So for me, when I first started doing it, the number one thing that you need to get your head around or need to get a grasp of is your inner voice.
Okay.
So a lot of us have internalized our parents, and a lot of us have a very unhealthy inner voice that is judging, shaming, and critical. And a lot of the time, these are our parents that we've internalized. So from my experience, growing up with my parents, particularly my dad, he criticized me a lot. He criticized most things that I did, and I had this deep fear of making mistakes, because if I made a mistake, then I would get criticized or shamed or judged for it. So, but those voices, when you're hearing them voices from such a young age, they become your voices. So my voice was very much my dad's voice. And what I realized when I first started looking at the 12 steps, I started looking at inner child stuff, and I researched. There was a guy on YouTube. I can share one of the links to his stuff, but it's called Wu Wei Wisdom, and it's a Chinese proverb, and it's all about flow and creating flow in the body. And he does a lot of work on inner child stuff. So he was absolutely one of the sort of like people for me that really led me and really taught me how. He does a whole program on it. So, but one of the main things was the inner critic. So it's becoming aware, because most of us are talking to ourselves all the time. I mean, I don't know how many thoughts we have a day. I mean, there's lots of numbers that get thrown around, but you know, like 10,000 thoughts a day, of which majority of them are negative. And then negative things that we're saying about ourselves, about how we look, about what we're wearing, about how we're coming across, about how we are in meetings, about how we are in relationships, whatever. Negative, 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 negative. And the thing is, those voices we can change, but if that voice is the main voice in your head, you're going to believe what it says. And because we believe, like you said earlier on, you know, as your children, you just believe what your parents say, because you don't really have cognitive reasoning until later in your life, until you're about 9, 10, 11. So we're very emotional as children, and we kind of see our parents as these godlike figures, these figures that we look up to, like the be all and end all, whatever they say goes, you know. That's what we do. We look up to them and we think that. And it's not until we start actually getting a little bit older we go, oh, actually they're not it. But it takes us some time, you know, but we sort of pick up these behaviors from them, and we pick up their voices, and that is internalized. You know, we decide our worthiness by the time we are 5 years old. So if we've got people telling us, reflecting back to us, that we are not worthy, we're going to believe that to be true, and then we're going to navigate our life from that space. So somebody that's starting out, to come back to your question, who is that? Ask yourself, who is that that's living inside your head?
I think we have 60,000 thoughts a day. And I said so many numbers getting thrown around. And I think what helps a lot is to understand that you are the observer of your thoughts, not necessarily the conscious thinker of them all. And it helps to actually visualize. So if, for example, if you were overweight as a child and your parents said, you're fat, no one's going to love you if you're fat. And then you're an adult and you want to buy some chocolate cake in the shop and you think, I better not because I'm fat and no one's going to love me if I'm fat. Just because you repeat what your parents say. But if you can visualize that thought and even just see the word, if you see that thought come into your mind, you can see it and understand you didn't consciously think it. And then you can say, actually, that's not me. And the thought goes.
That's it.
Okay.
That's
it.
No, seriously, it's like, it's not, this stuff is not rocket science, right? It's like, obviously people are like, oh, it must be really hard. This is, how do we do the word? Where do I start? It's all so complicated. I don't understand. It's too abstract. And I'm like, it's literally your thoughts. And it's literally your thoughts. And it's literally, so when you think about, yeah, of course, you know, you've got them, they're criticizing you, and it's not going to be an overnight thing. I'm not simplifying it in that terms. It is going to take work, and it does take practice, because this stuff is insidious. Like, every layer of my being believes these negative things. I believed I was stupid. When anyone ever told me that I was intelligent, I was like, they can't be talking about me because I'm really stupid. That's what I thought, because that's what I got told. And it's unbelievable that I thought that for like 37, 38 years of my life. I remember when someone said to me at work, you're really creative. Well, no, I'm not. I don't know what they're talking about. Who are they talking about? That can't be me. Because I was told that I wasn't, you know. And it's so sad that that's why so many people are navigating life like that. They are creative. We are creative. We're not stupid. We're all intelligent.
We are just conditioned to be extensions of our parents.
We are.
But you are not your parents. You're not your parents' words or your parents' thoughts. I think I have two questions to ask you, but I think I just want to thank you so much for the information, because I think it'll help a lot of people, especially starting off on the inner child journey and the techniques to use. So thank you for sharing there. I have two questions for you, if you don't mind. If you could skip forward in life to when you were 80 years old and you got to look back at where you are now, what would you be proud of?
Okay, that's a good question. For me, if I was 80 years old and I was looking back, I would be incredibly proud of everything that I've achieved. And I mean everything. I mean the whole thing. Not just since, 4 years ago when I started this work, but I mean the whole thing. How I dealt with my childhood, how I became the person that I did, against the odds, essentially. And how now I'm trying to, like, if I was 80 years old looking back at where I am now, I would just be so, just so grateful that I am able to articulate what happened to me, and I am able to produce like content in a way that reaches people, that could potentially help them as well. I can say what happened to me. I can actually put words to it. A lot of people can't, and I couldn't. When I look back 4 years ago, I couldn't. I never had the words, I never had the terminology, but now I do. And now I'm so grateful, obviously, that I have a platform that, that we have social media now, and that I can just put stories together and I can just say things together, and it resonates with people, and it can potentially inspire people and empower people. And I think that as that older person, as that older me, I'd just be so goddamn proud, man.
I think I know, based on what you just said, I think I know the answer to the next question. But I want to know, what is your why? Why do you get out of bed in the morning?
I believe this is my purpose. I believe that this is the reason I went through everything I went through. It drives me. I'm ambitious anyway, and I always have been, but I feel like my why is because, you know, if I could reach one person a day and change their lives, then that's a life worth living. If I was going to die today, I would be so happy with what I've achieved. I really would. And I'd be happy with exactly how I spent my day today, because I'm designing my life with that in mind, because we are not here forever. And I do believe that this is my purpose. I believe so strongly in this. Like, I believe, like, my channel, Self-Worth Revolution, right? And an inner child is a method to help you build self-worth, but it's not the only thing that I do. I do lots of other stuff with regards to empowering people, helping people with their healing journey, supercharging their healing journey wherever they're at, helping them have healthy relationships with themselves, with other people. I do lots of different things. It's not just the inner child thing, but essentially everything I do boils down to building people, helping people build their own self-worth and taking responsibility for their own lives. So I believe I don't see anything else outside of this. This is how much I feel so like compelled to do what I do every day. You know, I'm not getting paid for this essentially. This is because it's my drive, and I think that I can make the world a better place by doing this. I think it's my legacy, in a sense, that if I did die, I want people at my funeral to say, Jen helped me build my self-worth. And that, do you know what, how grateful and how amazing that makes me feel, you know.
For the people watching and the people listening, where can they find you online?
So they can find me on TikTok is my main channel. TikTok is probably my favorite channel, and that's where I try to show up most of the time. And that is, if you search Self-Worth Revolution, it should come up. And I'm also on Instagram as well.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and sharing your story. It's a lot, and I know that it'll help a lot of people.
You're welcome, and I hope it really does.